Ladies and gentlemen, the next plenary session is Economics Prospects and Business Development. Dr. Amitendu Palit, Head of Partnerships and Programs, and visiting senior researcher at ISAS, will introduce our panelists and moderate the session. Dr. Palit, please.
Thank you, Sarah. Welcome back, everybody, after, I'm sure, a very sumptuous lunch. It's tough to get things going after lunch. That is the usual cliche. But what we have done, and this is something which we did not realize before, is that the longest session of the day is actually the one right after lunch, the one that we're beginning now. So it's going to be a little testing. But what we are all hoping is that we have a very distinguished array of speakers who are expected to not only keep you awake, but also stimulate you into a very participating discussion. This is the first of the two panels that we have on economics and business development in the context of the larger theme that we are discussing today, India, China cooperation on global good. We have Professor Govind Hariharan, Mr. Chan Soo Sen, Professor Chen. They all will be speaking on three specific and very interesting perspectives. I rely upon my good friend, Professor Govind Hariharan, to give the startup after lunch, and hardly be any better than him on this. He has a very long CV, which obviously I would not want to read, it's all there in the folder, but currently he is the Executive Director of the India-China America Institute that functions out of Atlanta, currently based in the Kennesaw State University. Govind is also Professor and Chair of the Department of Economics, Finance and Quantitative Analysis at Bowles College of Business at Kennesaw. Has been working on a variety of economic subjects. He's a specialist in quantitative methods, and we are very happy to have Govind here today. So Govind will be speaking on India, China, and ASEAN, and off you, Govind.
Good afternoon. Amitendu asked me to be the first one to speak after lunch because he said, you're a close friend of mine. I said, with such friends, who needs enemies? My sincere thanks to ISAS, Ambassador Palit, to Dr. Palit, and the organizers of this fantastic event. The best way to visualize what I'm going to talk about is to think of some of the quotes from distinguished and very, very wise leaders. Not too long ago, earlier this year at the ASEAN Institute in India, Prime Minister Lee said that it was strategically important for India to be part of an emerging architecture for regional cooperation, where India is there at the table contributing, helping, and benefiting. More recently, Prime Minister Singh was quoted in the news as having said, the best is yet to come in India's relations with the 10-member ASEAN. And just this morning, Emeritus Senior Minister Tong pointed out that Southeast Asia is a natural partner for India and China. What I'm going to speak about very briefly is about India and ASEAN. which also includes and highlights the very significant role played by countries such as China and the United States. To start with, don't know if you can see that, a quick brief history lesson. India and ASEAN began sectoral dialogue partnership in 1992, which moved on to become a full dialogue partnership in 1995. Has held the ASEAN-India Summit annually since 2002, and at the second ASEAN-India Summit in 2003, the leaders signed the ASEAN-India Framework Agreement on Comprehensive Economic Cooperation, which was the establishment of an ASEAN-India Free Trade Area. On August 13, 2009, ASEAN and India signed the ASEAN-India Trade in Goods Agreement, which paves the way for the creation of one of the world's largest free trade areas, a market of almost 1.8 billion people with a combined GDP of approximately US $2.8 trillion. On November 6, 2008, the 14th ASEAN Transport Minister meeting was held in Makati, Metro Manila. There was a meeting of ASEAN and Indian tourism ministers, ATM plus India, to enhance tourism collaboration between ASEAN and India. On January 12, 2012, the ASEAN and India tourism minister signed the MOU between ASEAN and India on strengthening tourism cooperation. Similarly, an ASEAN-India ministerial meeting on agriculture and forestry was held, and a medium-term plan for action for ASEAN-India cooperation in agriculture was reached. Between 1993 and 2003, ASEAN-India bilateral trade grew at an annual rate of 11.2% from US $2.9 billion to US $12.1 billion in 2003. In 2011, the total trade between ASEAN and India was US $68.4 billion, a growth of 23.4% from $54.4 billion in 2010. This accounted, however, for only 2.9% of the total ASEAN trade in 2011. As for foreign direct investment, the inflow from India to ASEAN was minuscule, and it actually decreased by $1.8 billion in 2011. In tourism, the number of visitor arrivals from India to ASEAN in 2010 was 2.47 million, an increase from 2.1 million in 2009. But what is a better way to wake up people after a heavy, fantastic lunch than to put up a whole bunch of numbers and a few charts? How many of you are excited? So this is a chart. Now most of these statistics either came from ASEAN or from the World Trade Organization. So if you look at foreign direct investment inflow in 2009 and 2010, where the red line is for 2010 and the yellow line is for 2009, there's a significant difference between Singapore, Indonesia, and the rest of ASEAN in terms of foreign direct investment. And a lot of the discussions that recently has happened has been in the context of encouraging greater inflows of foreign direct investment into the many other regions and states, countries within ASEAN. partners for ASEAN in 2010. The largest bloc, which is the first one, is within ASEAN. So ASEAN has been so far its own biggest trading partner. It is followed by China, which is the second largest or the largest external trading partner for ASEAN, followed by the European Union, Japan, USA, Republic of Korea, and India is pretty small. So the difference between the engagement between ASEAN and China and ASEAN and India is pretty significantly different. And that has been the focus of a lot of the statements from people such as Prime Minister Singh in terms of the attaching a very high priority to the relationship with ASEAN and enhancing its growth. So both in terms of exports and in imports, there is a significant difference between ASEAN relations and quantities of trade with China as opposed to India. The top 10 ASEAN trade commodity groups. The first one, seems to have omitted the actual categories, but this was electrical equipment, machinery, if I recall correctly, and fourth was automotive. So it was mostly in the manufacturing space that most of this trade was happening, both within as well as outside of ASEAN. Not much in the context of services. This is intra-ASEAN trade for the same commodity groups. All three of the top categories are all heavily what we would call industrial manufacturing. Similarly, trade with countries outside who are not members of ASEAN is again dominated by the same top three manufacturing or industrial concentrated sectors. This is ASEAN trade by partner countries for 2010. These are exports from ASEAN. The first number is for China, the second number is for India. This is imports by ASEAN. The first number is for China, the second number is for India. And this is total trade. This is China, this is India. Pretty sizable distinction in terms of numbers. This is another quick slide on merchandise trade of ASEAN, trade agreements broken down by whether it is intra-ASEAN, extra-ASEAN. So exports, there is a lot of exports from ASEAN to other countries outside of ASEAN. This is total imports, which is mostly within ASEAN. So as we saw in those numbers, a lot of trade that has happened in ASEAN has been within ASEAN, very little of it outside. And one of the biggest drivers of growth in a region is trade. Not just within itself, but trade with adjacent and neighborhood regions. How many of you are familiar with NAFTA? Okay. So the North American Free Trade Agreement was an agreement, again a regional trade agreement between the US, Canada, and Mexico. Canada is USA's #1 trading partner. Mexico typically ranks either 3 or 4. So those types of regional agreements have resulted in significant growth in both Canada as well as in Mexico, and the US has not suffered from it either. And that has been the impetus between expanding the connectedness of ASEAN to neighboring countries, including key countries such as China and India. There are three aspects to this connectivity. One is focused on projects that are of an infrastructure in nature. So whether it is building highways, whether it is establishing ports and proper sea lanes, or establishing an aviation agreement between ASEAN and many of these key neighbors, all of that fall within infrastructure connectivity. That is the area in which the most progress has been made. The second is institutional connectivity. So in order for trade to prosper between regions, it is imperative, that the governments and policies are properly aligned so that it becomes very easy to trade with one another, to interact with one another. And the last but not the least important connectivity is people to people. If people don't know each other, if they don't get along with each other, it is very difficult to get politicians and policymakers to buy into any connectivity. So in that domain, this is a snapshot of some of the work that has been done in the context of a regional framework to enhance ASEAN-India connectivity. So there's a whole bunch of road, highway construction, including highway number 1, or what is called the trilateral highway, which will connect India, Thailand, and Myanmar. There's also a call to establish appropriate ports in Dawei to facilitate trade between ports such as Chennai and Dawei. This captures all of those in a simpler diagram. So as you can see, there's between the big cities in India, and then going all the way through Bangladesh, to Thailand, to Myanmar, all the way down. Is the proposed infrastructure projects, many of whom have commenced and some are still in the bidding stage. A key component of this is what is called the Mekong India Economic Corridor, which has been highlighted in every discussion because the establishment of such a corridor has benefits to India, to ASEAN, to China, you name it. A whole range of countries, both in Asia and elsewhere, are big proponents of this and stand to benefit in terms of enhanced growth in trade, as well as economic well-being that can come about as a result of the creation of this corridor. So to summarize and look forward, the future is bright. Every minister, every prime minister, every president has been on the same page in terms of this particular partnership between India and ASEAN in innovation, in infrastructure, in education, and in health, leading the way. In order for connectivity, people-to-people connectivity is key, and many cultural exchanges, many student exchanges have all been put into place in order to enhance this growth. This is one of the major initiatives in which India and China are in agreement. This is one of the initiatives in which the US is also a big proponent, which Singapore is a big proponent, ASEAN is a big proponent of this particular relationship and its potential for growth in this entire region. When you think then about the Trans-Pacific agreements that are being considered, all of this links together into the most critical economic partnership within a very large region with very large populations. As the senior minister mentioned this morning, And this was a great quote, so I had to write it down. He said, competition between rising powers is inevitable, but conflict is not. The role of Singapore is absolutely critical in this particular collaboration. I don't know who exactly made this reference, but I've come across this reference where Singapore was referred to as a bird with two wings. One is China and the other is India. I want to modify that a little bit, because a bird does not have just two wings, it has many other parts. So if you were to think of a bird with the body being ASEAN, with the wing being China and other wing being India, we still have the legs. Singapore can provide the legs and has been the heart for forging most of these partnerships. Whether it is between India and China, India and ASEAN, between US, India and China, Singapore has played a critical role, and therefore Singapore to me captures the vision of those two strong legs that that bird stands on, with a huge heart. So with that, I will stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Govind. I think there are a few very important takeaways from what you said. ASEAN obviously has a very important role to play in the India-China engagement. But as you showed from the statistics, in terms of individuals, China's engagement with ASEAN at this point in time is far more than India's is, and that obviously is a point to be noted. And I think also the last point that you mentioned, the critical role of Singapore, and as it now appears, the next presentation is between the two giants, how should Singapore achieve win-win? So we are actually following a very natural course in the sequential order of getting into the deeper subject of regional cooperation. Mr. Chan Soo Sen is not a stranger to a Singaporean audience, so I really don't have to take the trouble of introducing him, except for mentioning that he has had a very long career as a member of Parliament, and he has also held important official positions like in the Parliamentary Secretary, and he has also been in the Prime Minister's office. And also in another incarnation, he has been distinguished at a very senior level, and he would now speak on how Singapore can achieve the synergies in China. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. When the professor mentioned that China and India are two big wings, and we have a pair of legs in the middle with a heart, it threw me totally apart. Fortunately, I didn't produce any slides, otherwise I would not have known how to continue. So, since I'm blown apart temporarily, I will just say that let's look a little bit about some strengths that Singapore has. All of you know that Singapore is a very, very small country, but we have kept the embassies of our two big partners very, very busy indeed. Because we have quite a lot of bilateral dealings with both India as well as China, quite out of proportion of our size. That basically, I think, is because of a few factors. That firstly, Singapore experience is something that both India and China would like to look at. And the fact that we are small make it easier for them to study. We are pretty small, pretty homogeneous, and yet in the last 40 years, we have gone through about 3 economic transformations. From labor intensive to capital intensive to skills and knowledge intensive, and now trying to achieve innovation intensive. So every time we have this change, there will be quite a lot of consequential changes that we need to deal with. Retraining of the workforce, and education style, how to deal with retrenched workers, how to deal with the social problems, how to motivate people to press on. Because sometimes if you have one transformation, you want to press on again, everybody says, well, why should we bother? We are already flying in the air. And the fact that we are small means that every transformation takes relatively short period of time, so a case study you don't need to wait 50 years in order to do all this. So therefore, the Chinese and the Indian government looked at our experience and found that it was something that is worthwhile sharing with us. And the fact that we have this thing called Singapore Inc., which means Singapore government work relatively closely with the private sector as well as the people, so we behave like a company called Singapore Inc., makes it even more interesting. Of course, the fact that Singapore has good political relationship with both India and China also helps. You see, when we work with China, we compare ourselves with India, say Hong Kong and Taiwan business people. Singaporeans will always say that, oh, we want to quote bilateral relationship, the closeness in relationship between our leaders. Whereas for Hong Kong and Taiwan, they never quote this. And therefore, their behavior is totally different. This is our strength. I suppose this is also partly our weakness. But one real other strength is we have got very good network with multinational companies. And our network gives us the possibility of maybe acting as a middle agency, a middle person to bring the MNCs to both India as well as China. But these are our strengths. But we also have to remember, we may have two big wings, we have only two small legs. Remember the limitation of our legs' capability. Firstly, I think we must always remember that dealing with Indians and Chinese is very different from dealing with Singaporean Chinese and Singaporean Indians. We are fundamentally quite different. And we must always remember that while Changi is very similar to Jurong, Woodlands very similar to Telok Blangah, Shanghai is not quite the same as Guangzhou. Again, Qingdao is quite different from Lhasa. For that matter, the four big hubs, I'm quite sure Chennai is very different from New Delhi, and Kolkata is very, very different from Mumbai. This is a sense that we Singaporeans sometimes forget. We thought everybody is the same. Just because we speak each other's language, we are fine. Point is, we are not quite. Secondly, one weakness that we have, I think, is a cooperation amongst private sector is not strong enough. See, precisely because the Taiwanese government has little local standard in China, and the Hong Kong government have very little local standard in China, so their businesses, they work with each other. They collaborate with each other first. They don't talk about profit sharing. Let's ask around and see who is most knowledgeable. Zino's company may hold only 5% of the equity, but he knows his place best, so he shall be the chairman. Singaporean businesses, I think we are not that big hearted. Let's talk about profit sharing first. It must be 25, 30, or God knows what. But you know what? You have not got any profit yet. 25% of zero is still zero. That we forget. And thirdly, I would hope that our government agencies, I know NTI is here, remember to continue to help us promote our business prospect compared with the time when I did Suzhou, I find our government agencies now are a little bit more arm's length than those days. Okay? And as a result, small and medium-sized enterprises find it going tougher. Okay? Looking at the more recent success stories, many of them are domestic link companies. But domestic link companies, to many people, it has government's capability, it has government's size and government's network. But if you're talking about smaller companies and smaller enterprises, they do not have that kind of a prestige, that kind of a connection, and that is where perhaps some of government agencies like TDP could help a bit more. But having said that, I see our DS taking down notes. Having said that, I also must say, I would like to appeal to our SMEs to be more open to government agencies about their game plan. One thing about our SME is everything secret, dare not share with anybody. If we share with others, others may steal your cake and eat it. But if you have not gotten the cake yet, there's nothing to eat. Might as well talk about how you are going to get the cake and see whether TDP, MTI agencies can help us get the cake. You may say, having seen the cake may be good for you to share with others. Well, half of a slice is half a slice. One of no slice is no slice. Choice is yours. So I think these are the kind of thoughts and perspective that we must overcome. We must be more big-hearted in order to tackle these two big wings. Otherwise, we'll be torn apart. Can you imagine a bird of that size, wing so big and a body so small? That is the bird that the professor described. I don't know how you're going to navigate that one. Well, having said that, I also want to raise 3 possible areas that I think we will be able to make a difference if we were to work with the Chinese and the Indian governments or private sectors. One is what I call education and skills training. Singapore has got good education system, but very importantly, Singapore has very good skills training program. Our polytechnic and our institution of our ITE, the Institute of Technical Education, are something that both India and China do not quite have. They may have some vocational institute, but it's not comprehensive. And unfortunately, these vocational institutes are so important to industrial development, and yet they suffer from very poor public image. In China, if you get your children, if my son gets sent to a vocational institute, I won't try to tell my friends. We faced the same problem 30 years ago. Now, not anymore. If my son goes to a polytechnic or an ITE, well, I may wish I could go to university, but I'm prepared to quite proudly tell my friends that he has got something useful. Because the issue is not education, the issue is skill. China and India both has very rich manpower resources, but in terms of skilled manpower resources, it's not rich. If we can find a way for our polytechnic and ITE to play a role there, then I think we can work together for the global good by educating and training these two vast workforce. Polytechnic and ITE, because they receive most of the fund from the government, they can't invest overseas. But there's nothing to stop the Chinese or the Indian, for example, industrial parks to say, we come up with the investment, we will build the institution, you provide expertise, you design the courses for us, make sure that you can tailor directly to the needs of the industry, and we have a deal. We have a company, we have the infrastructure, and we pay you consultancy fees, and you come and work with us. I think this will be one model that both IT and Polytechnic will be very, very happy to adopt. Second area is what I would call medical services and health management. Both of these countries have health service that can be significantly improved. Not only for the expatriates or the middle class, upper middle class who are in these two countries, but also health management for the masses. In fact, we also have good medical service. If we are able to somehow find a partner over there, because health service, medical services are very, very heavily regulated. If we find good partners there, where we can bring in our skills into their structure, we will be able to very significantly improve the delivery and service of health as well as medical. And this will be good for humanity, because you are talking about two biggest humanities in the whole world. Together they make up something like 40% of the world's population. The third area is what I would say master planning or city planning. Both countries are urbanizing in a big way. I'm less familiar with India, but China, when I was in primary school, we have a population of 700 million, of which 85% are in the countryside, 15% in the city. Today is a population of 1.3 billion, roughly 50% in the city. So think of the pace of urbanization, from 15% of 700 million to 50% of 1.3 billion. They need to build one city of 500,000 every week, and it has to be sustainable. We do have some knowledge in planning for eco-cities. Make sure it's sustainable, and it has got to be sustainable city built when we're still not rich yet. There are many sustainable cities in Europe, but they build them after they become rich. And each one has got a population of a few thousand. We need to build cities before we are rich, and each one must have a population of about 500,000. If we can together solve this problem, develop a template in China, a template in India, then next time together, we will go Latin America, we will go Africa, because the time will come when they will also urbanize. And together, with the two big wing and small leg, we can do for the global good. So these are our dreams. I just hope that our Singaporean companies, firstly, can see the big picture. Secondly, have a bigger heart. Collaborate amongst ourselves a little bit better. Collaborate with our Indian and China partner, looking at longer term view. See whether we can go a little bit beyond short-term investment return or not. Because investment return is a number that is only an estimate. All the number I've seen in China project, Indian project, always proven wrong. We always tend to underestimate, because they are growing so fast and it is quite beyond the scope of our calculator. Last but not least, to our Singaporean friends, keep some good brand names with you. We are far too fast in selling some of our good brand names. We are so Raffles Hotel, we are so PSP Lab, we have sold PWD, we have just sold Tiger Beer. Because of this, I stopped drinking Tiger Beer. I think we are going to sell at an end. But all these brand names are something that our neighbors recognize. Singapore government is also something that our neighbors recognize. We can't keep on quoting the government because the government can't be everywhere. But some of these good brand names, they can be everywhere. So please keep some. We have also sold SPC, Singapore Petroleum, right? There are others. I think before we do that, remember it is not easy to build our brand name and our credibility. We sell this and we may end up having a smaller feet to handle the two big wings. So 2 minutes up. I don't want to see the last one, so thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chan Soo Sen, for very specifically identifying technical skills, medical services, and townland urban landscapes as the areas where the synergies can be constructed. One of the themes that we thought we would discuss in the course of this conference is to look at the economic prospects of China and India, and where one of the very under-discussed issues is the scope and ability of social security to guarantee citizens in both countries a better life. India is yet to embark on an ambitious scheme of social security. China has over the last few years. And it has also probably caused several distortions in the Chinese economy and has led to several discussions both in academics and outside. Professor Wang Zhen, who is with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, one of the most influential economic policy think tanks in China, and is the Deputy Director of the Institute of Economics in CAS, has been working for a very long time on income distribution, social security, migration, and health economics, and other issues of development economics in China. And social security has been his major focus in terms of his very active participation in the Chinese government projects that he has been handling from CAS. We are very happy to have Wang Chen over here. Wang Chen, over to you.